ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Broadway Church. My name is Simon, and it is a pleasure to be here and to welcome you here. I'm one of the pastors of the church, and today we're going to continue on in this series that we're doing called Life Leeches. Now, I just want to hold up before we get into everything. You guys saw the Vacation Bible School recap video that was made. I just want to publicly address that Pastor Kirsten, Pastor Aaron, they're our children's pastors here at the church. They are phenomenal, them and their team. Can we just honor them, give a big round of applause? Thank you, guys. I'm just so proud to be part of a church that cares about kids, cares about the next generation, and they are doing a fantastic job with all of our kids and bringing up the next generation. Okay, with that being said, who's ever heard of Dustin Hoffman before? Dustin Hoffman. Yeah, okay, so this guy here, this is Dustin Hoffman. He's 77 years old, and he's a two-time Oscar Award winner. He's an acting legend, okay? And he is in no way, shape, or form ever going to get that title taken away from him. And in August, he did an interview, and he said that he is worried about the future. He said that he's worried about his future failures in his career. Now, you might know Dustin Hoffman from movies like Kramer versus Kramer or Hook. Yeah? Hook, one of my favorites. Rain Man. Or most recently in Kung Fu Panda 3, he was the voice of Shifu. And this guy, he's done it all, and he's continuing to get acting gigs, and he's continuing to do his best on the screen, and he says he's worried about his future failure. So in an interview, he said this. He said, "I bet it's not just me either. We worry about the next thing. There are these extraordinary tennis players," he says, "who get out there and they admit that they're just shaking to be able to get the next serve in. And that's all of us," he says. "They say you're only as good as your last picture. Well, we think we're only as good as our last piece of good work." Hoffman admitted that one of his biggest fears is that he's never going to be hired again. It's a constant fear and worry that he lives in. Is this it? Today, we're dealing with the life leech of worry. We're dealing with the life leech of worry. What are you worried about? Think about it in your own life right now. What are you really worried about? Maybe it's financial. Maybe it's the housing market. Maybe it's a career thing, finding the right job. Maybe it has to do with your kids. Maybe it's a family issue going on. Maybe it's your health concerns, and maybe nobody else knows about it, only you. Maybe it's your relationship status. Maybe you're wondering if you've peaked, if there's anything else for you. Maybe you're worried that you're only as good as your last picture or your last sermon. Ooh. That joke didn't go over well at 9 a.m. So start thinking about that thing right now. What are you really worried about? What are you really worried about? Now, some of you are sitting here thinking, duh, Simon. What do you mean, what am I worried about? Start thinking about it now. I haven't stopped thinking about that thing since I got up this morning, since I drove here, since I sat down in these pews, and I'm still constantly thinking about that thing right now. It's nagging on the back of my mind. That is just the nature of worry. It's the life leech that is constantly sucking joy from our life, constantly taking up our time, and it constantly gets us to run around in circles. No matter what may be weighing on you today, I want you to think. Be honest with yourself. What are you really worried about? What are you actually worried about? Jesus asks his disciples a very similar question when he says, "What are you so afraid of?" What are you so afraid of? We're going to take a look at a story today where Jesus and his disciples, they get into a boat and they go to cross the Sea of Galilee. And talk about worry. These guys are dealing with a life and death situation when a storm blows up. Let's read this together. This is Mark chapter 4, verse 35. The day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind him, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, and it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, he rebuked the wind and the waves, and he said, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified, and they asked each other, who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? Let's just hit the pause button for a second before we start to unpack this text. Let's just all sit back in awe that Jesus is a miracle worker. We've talked about this many times before here at Broadway, but every time we talk about miracles of Jesus, they're just that. They're miracles. Even the wind and the waves obey him. All of nature halts at his glory. He is God. Jesus is a miracle worker. Amen? He's a God of the impossible. Nothing is impossible for him. I love how Jesus calls to the root of their problem, right to the root, their fear. What are you so afraid of? What are you so worried about? Do you still have no faith? No matter what's weighing on you today, whether it's just a small little rain cloud, that's just maybe just sprinkling over you today, but it's got you worried, it's got you anxious, it's got you fearful. Maybe in your life that what started as a pesky little rain cloud over your head has now developed into a full-fledged storm. And whatever the issue is that you're facing, whether it be finances or family matters or things with your kids, health concerns, maybe it took everything in you just to get up and get here today because you're in so much pain. And that pesky little rain cloud has developed into a full-fledged storm, and you feel like you can barely hang on. Regardless of what it is today, if you find yourself with this leech of worry that's sucking the joy from your life, I want to give you hope today. I want to deal with two really practical things that we can remember when we're in the storm. Now, not all storms develop slowly over time. Sometimes storms in your life can happen in the blink of an eye. So maybe you're here today and you're not going through a storm. The truth is, weather can change quickly and a storm can come up out of nowhere. And the truth is, things in our lives can change quickly. Something we would never choose or wish upon our worst enemy, but they can blow up out of nowhere. This here is a picture of the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is 680 feet below sea level, and it's surrounded by mountains. And experts say the Sea of Galilee is the perfect place for a storm to blow up out of nowhere. At any moment, a storm could just explode out of nothing onto the Sea of Galilee, and that's exactly what happened to the disciples. How many people here today would be honest enough with me, with our church, with each other, with yourself, to say, Simon, it may be a small one, it may be a big one, it may just be brewing on the horizon, but you'd be honest enough to say, Simon, in my life, or maybe even in the life of someone that I love, there's a storm, and I'm in the midst of it right now. How many of you would be honest enough to say that's you today, that there's a storm in your life or in the life of someone that you love? Yeah. Okay, so just by all the hands up, you're kind of testifying amongst us as a church saying, like, you're not alone. There are storms that are going on in our life. And those of you that didn't put your hand up, look around at the hands that were up. Know that you're not alone. Storms happen in our life. It's inevitable. These things come up. So many of us find ourselves in situations we didn't see coming and we would never choose. So no matter what storm you're facing today, we're going to unpack two practical things that we can remember when we're in the midst of the storm. If you have your outlines with you, number one, you're in the storm with his presence. You're in the storm with his presence. Mark chapter 4, verse 37, it says, a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. And Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. Where was Jesus? This is not a trick question. Where was Jesus? Yeah, he was in the stern. He was in the boat. Jesus was in the boat. And yet this storm blows up all around them. Jesus was with them. Jesus was in the boat. You're in the storm with his presence. Now, oftentimes in church, in Christianity, what will happen is this bad theology sometimes perks up. This wrongful thinking, it perks up. And it seems the longer you've been a Christian, the longer you've been a follower of Christ, the easier it is to combat this lie. But this is what comes up in Christian circles all the time. Well, if I'm with Jesus, there shouldn't be a storm. If I'm with Jesus, there shouldn't be a storm. If Jesus is in my boat, it should be smooth sailing. The fact is, this couldn't be farther from the truth. When you signed up to be on Team Jesus, he actually tells us in John 16:33, in this world you will have trouble, but fear not, but take heart, I've overcome the world. Jesus never promised a storm-free existence for followers of Christ. In fact, the opposite is often true. In this world, you will have trouble. Not maybe, not possibly. You will have trouble. And so often I see these maybe newer Christians or people that are just exploring their faith, and it's these storms that develop in their life where they end up leaving the church. They turn their back on God because they think deep down, if Jesus is in my boat, because I signed up for Team Jesus, there shouldn't be a storm. And they start to shake their angry fist at God, saying, God, if you were real, there wouldn't be a storm in my life. But this is just not the case. Somewhere along the lines in our Christian culture, we look at Christianity, we look at the church as a cruise ship. As a cruise ship. Has anyone been on a cruise ship before? Hands up, let's see them, loud and proud. My cruisers, where are my cruisers at? Wow, I thought there'd be more of us. In the 9 a.m. service, like everybody was like, yeah, we go on cruises all the time. My wife and I, we love cruises. We've been on a number of them, and our very first one was on our honeymoon. This here is a picture of our honeymoon. My beautiful 20-year-old bride. I love you, honey. We fell in love not only with each other, but with cruises. If you've never been on a cruise before, let me explain the gloriousness of cruises. Every morning you wake up and you're in a new city. Yeah, you just happen to be in a new city. You wake up, a new city to explore. You can hop on and off the boat at will whenever you want. There are endless food buffets. They never end. Endless. It was 2 a.m, and my wife and I, we decided, hey, we could go for some popcorn and shrimp. So we did. It was amazing. One night, we were up on the top deck of the cruise. We were sitting in the hot tub, like right at the very back of the cruise. We were surrounded by nothing but the stars and the Pacific Ocean. And I remember laying back in this hot tub thinking, I've arrived. This is the American dream. I did it. And I remember thinking, this is oh so comfortable. There's constant entertainment on a cruise ship. We think Pastor Phil's good up here, okay? Cruise ship, he's no cruise ship, okay? Pastor Phil, cruise ships, it's amazing, the entertainment on a cruise ship. But somewhere along the line, we are treating the church or Christianity like a cruise ship. And you see, we think that we can get on and off whenever we want. When there's something that goes wrong or there's not smooth sailing, we just hop off and we can hop back on. We're here to get endlessly fed. We're here to be constantly entertained. And the moment that there's any turbulence at all, we can just check out. When Christians, when the church, when we treat Christianity like a cruise ship, we forget that Jesus didn't die so we could put a nice comfortable spin on the Christian American dream. Jesus died to change the world. Jesus died to introduce people, to invite people into a relationship with the God of the universe. As your outline says, Christianity is not a cruise ship, but a battleship. Christianity is not a cruise ship, but a battleship. You see, a cruise ship is on vacation, yeah? But a battleship is on mission. A cruise ship is on vacation, but a battleship is on mission. On a cruise ship, the passengers on board, they've all checked out, but on a battleship, the crew is extremely purposeful. On a cruise ship, people are overwhelmed with any turbulence, but on a battleship, the crew actually expects adversity. So if you're thinking that just because Jesus is on your boat, that everything should be smooth sailing, think again. When you become a follower of Jesus, you move from darkness into light, and you step into the midst of a spiritual battle happening all around you. And when you step onto the side of light, the enemy is now darkness. And you will face opposition, you will face temptation, and you will face persecution. And every day you will have to fight for the cause of Christ. This is what it means to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. When we sign up for Team Jesus, this is the fight that we signed up for. Christianity is not a cruise ship, but a battleship. And if you're thinking that just because Jesus is on my boat, nothing should ever go wrong, it's a misunderstanding of what it means to be a follower of Christ and a distortion of the gospel. As your outline says, having Jesus on your boat doesn't mean the storm won't rock you. It means it won't sink you. Having Jesus on your boat doesn't mean that the storm won't rock you. It means it won't sink you. Life issues will rock you. Finances, relationships, family matters, and family members for that matter. Your career, your job opportunities, physical pain. But when Jesus is in your boat, they're not going to sink you. They're not going to sink you. Jesus never promised a storm-free existence for followers of Christ, but he does promise to be with you. Just as Jesus was with the disciples in the boat, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, God is with you. He's with you. We've said this many times before here at the church. If this was the only instructive that we'd ever received from God, that he's with us, it would still warrant my total devotion to unquestionably follow him for the rest of my life. God being with us is a big deal. Joshua 1:9 says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong, be courageous. Don't be discouraged. Don't be afraid, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." In fact, we can take this whole ship analogy one step further and say Christianity isn't a cruise ship. It might not even be a battleship. Christianity at its core is a relationship with the God of the universe. He wants to be in relationship with you. He wants to go with you. He wants to go before you, and he will never leave you. Psalm chapter 46 says this: God is our shelter and our strength. When troubles seem near, God is nearer and he's ready to help. So why run and hide? No fear, no pacing, no biting fingernails. When the earth spins out of control, let's say this together: we are sure and fearless. When mountains crumble and the waters run wild, let's say it together: we are sure and fearless. Even in heavy winds and huge waves, or as mountains shake, let's say it together: we are sure and fearless. God tells us, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. The psalmist writes, even though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Whatever you're worried about today, you're in the storm with his presence. God is with you. Pastor Phil led us in a song called Hosanna, right when we started off this morning. And these are the words in the bridge that we just sang. I just jotted them down as I was standing there singing. When we see you, we find strength to fight the day. In your presence, all our fears are stripped away. In your presence, all our fears are stripped away. We know this to be true. You're in the storm with his presence. You're in the storm with his presence. Okay, so the second thing that we can remember when we're in the midst of a storm, you are in the storm for his purposes. You're in the storm for his purposes. Now look at this. It was Jesus that said, let's go to the other side. Mark chapter 4:35, the day when evening came, Jesus, said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side. It was his idea. Jesus is God in the flesh. He's all-knowing, all-powerful, and he full well knew that he was leading the disciples through the middle of a storm. It was his idea. Hey guys, let's go for a sail, shall we? It was his idea. So we can conclude, as your outline says, the disciples didn't experience the storm because they were out of God's will. They experienced the storm because they were in God's will. The disciples didn't experience the storm because they were out of God's will, but because they were in God's will. A good friend of mine and his wife were trying to have a baby. And they were trying, and the months turned to years, and the years went by, and they ended up having 4 miscarriages, back to back to back to back. If you've ever experienced a miscarriage or tried to have a baby and weren't able to, the storm is crushing. The amount of emotional pain and everything that you go through, it's crushing. The weight of the storm is crushing. And so there they are after their 4th miscarriage, and it was Christians that came to them trying to offer help, as Christians sometimes do. And they're trying to figure out on their behalf, well, what's wrong with you guys? What are you doing wrong? And not with trying to have a kid, but what's going wrong in your soul? Do you have hidden sin in your life? Are you so far outside the will of God that God has caused this storm to brew up in your life? So not only were they dealing with this pain of all these miscarriages, but they're dealing with the pain and the offense of people all around them. So often we think that if God's not blessing us, it's because we're out of God's will. We think that if there's a storm in our life, it's because we caused it. It's because we've done something to offend the Almighty. But that's simply not the case. Sometimes you're in the storm because you're in God's will. Sometimes you're in the storm because you're in God's will. Now, some of you guys might be getting all hot and bothered in your seats, ready to throw your pew Bibles at me because you're going, Simon, I know what you're saying. I know what you're implying, Simon. You're implying that God caused this storm in my life. Simon, if you had any idea of the storm and the pain and the worry that haunts me every single day, and for you to have the audacity to say that God caused this, you'd be crazy, Simon. And right now, you're kind of feeling that tension right now. And I can't say if God caused a storm in your life. I'm not saying that God caused the storm in your life. I don't know if God in his sovereignty allowed the storm in your life, but I do know this. He always uses it. He always uses it. He uses the storms in our life to do a work inside of us. He wants to mature us in our faith. James chapter 1 verse 2 says this, Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, when a storm is brewing in your life, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Craig Rochelle says the difference between where you are and where God ultimately wants you is the storm you have yet to endure. Let that sink in for a second. The difference between where you are and where God ultimately wants you is the storm you have yet to endure. God will use the storm to bring you where he wants you. You're in the storm for his purposes. You're in the storm for his purposes. If you've ever met anyone that is rock solid in their faith, you would point to them and be like, that guy is unshakable in his faith. I can promise you they've been through some tough storms with Jesus. They know his faithfulness, they know his presence, and they've learned that there's a purpose in every single storm. That God wants to do something in us and is teaching us something in the middle of the storm that we couldn't learn any other way. Did he cause it? Did he allow it? I don't know, but I know he always uses it. You're in the storm for his purposes. Romans chapter 8, I love this. It says this, we are confident that God is able to orchestrate everything to work towards something good and beautiful when we love him and we accept his invitation to live according to his plan. That God is able to orchestrate everything into something good and beautiful. Today, church, no matter what storm is brewing on the horizon in your life, are you willing to let go of the worry and let God orchestrate something good and beautiful in your life? Oftentimes, we can't let go of the storm. That's not an option. We have to bear down and ride the storm out. But we can let go of the worry. We can't let go of the storm. We need to ride it out, but we can let go of the worry. Even right now, whatever storm is in your life, let the worry start to dissipate. I can't get rid of the storms in your life. You can't get rid of the storms in your life, but you can let the worry disappear because you're in the storm with his presence. Yeah, like he's actually going with you. And you're in the storm for his purposes. Like he actually knows what he's doing. Today, if you do this, if you surrender control, you surrender your past hurts, you surrender your future dreams, you surrender it firmly into his hands, he will go with you and he will reveal his plan for your life. You see, when the disciples were faced with the reality and the power of Jesus, like when they witnessed this miracle, like you picture this happening, the boat is being almost capsized and the waves are crashing in and the disciples are losing their minds. Some of them are losing their biscuits and they wake up Jesus and they say, Jesus, get up. We're all gonna die. We're going down. Like, get up. Like, don't you care? We're going down. And Jesus says, have you no faith? Why are you so afraid? And he commands the storm, be still, be quiet, and it's completely calm. And when they're faced with that kind of power, that kind of reality of Jesus Christ, they stand back and they ask themselves a profound question. And this is the same question I'm going to ask us to ask ourselves in just a moment. They stand back and they ask themselves, who is this man? Who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? Today in your life, no matter the storm that you face, you need to ask yourself this question: who is this man to you? Who is this man to you? Is Jesus on your boat or not? Are you allowing him to be God in your life or aren't you? Are you willing to let Jesus just go on sleeping as you frantically run around trying to figure out your life, the life that he gave you, the life that he is so much more capable of taking care of for you than you? Just a moment, I'm going to close. And I'm going to invite everyone here, no matter if you've been a follower of Christ forever, or if you're first time here at Broadway, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say yes to Jesus, to let the worry dissipate from your soul, to get that life leech out, and to invite Jesus to be the leader of your life and the forgiver of your sins from this day forward. You can start gearing up for that now, because in about 3 minutes, I'm going to invite you to say a prayer with me. So whatever storm you're in, remember, you're in the storm with his presence, and you're in the storm for his purposes. Let me close with our big idea for today, our big idea. This one thought to sum all this teaching up on this topic of worry. There's an interesting article written, and it says this: the researchers have shown you live longer. This is kind of more geared towards older people, but they say you live longer if there's something living in your house. You live longer, like actually live longer if there's something living in your house. And this is fascinating. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything. As long as there's something living in your house, you will live longer. It could be a, grumpy old man that doesn't even talk to you. But if he's living, you have a better chance of living longer. It could be a dog, a puppy. It could be a plant, a fern, a goldfish. There's even some research to show that even some kinds of cats, but the research is still out on that. If you have something living in your house, the chances that you'll live longer are better. And every so often, a storm will brew up in your life, and it'll get bad. It'll be really bad. So if you're not in a storm right now, know that storms will come. And just because you're a follower of Christ doesn't mean storms won't come in your life. But every so often, a storm will blow up out of nowhere in your life, and it's going to get really bad. And people are going to look at you and say, how are you getting through that? How are you enduring this? How come your whole world is falling apart, and yet you're not falling apart? How is it that you're able to go on with all of this chaos around you, and you still have this quiet confidence? Why is it that you have peace in the middle of a storm? And you see, you'll be able to tell them, it's because there's something living in my house. You see, that something living in my house isn't just life, but it's the author of life. Jesus is in my house and he's in my boat. I can sense his presence, I can sense his purpose, and I know his power because he is with me. And just because I'm in a storm doesn't mean that he's not with me. And this is our big idea for today. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. No matter who you are or what you believe before you came into this auditorium today, God is actively working in your life, and he's calling you unto himself. When the disciples faced the presence and the power and the purpose of Jesus there on the boat, they asked themselves, who is this man? Today, as you're faced with the presence and the purposes and the power of Jesus, I'm going to ask you to pray with me in just a moment and ask yourself, who is this man to me?